I used to think the dark web was just an overhyped myth. People talked about it like it was some forbidden place, full of assassins, human trafficking rings, and disturbing, cursed videos that would drive you insane if you watched them. I always assumed it was mostly exaggerated, just another part of the internet where people made up stories to scare each other. I never thought I would actually find something that would stay with me, something that would make me question whether I was ever truly alone again. It started on a night like any other. I was home, sitting in my dimly lit room, my laptop glowing softly in the darkness. I had gone down the rabbit hole of reading about deep web horror stories, people who had stumbled upon strange, encrypted websites, eerie chat rooms, and disturbing live streams. Some of them were obviously fake, but some had a ring of truth to them. The way they were written, the details, the way people described the feeling they got when they clicked on something they weren't supposed to. I wanted to see for myself. I had used Tor before, just to see what was out there. I wasn't looking for anything illegal, just lurking in forums and exploring strange, abandoned sites. That night, I came across a thread on an old message board. The title was simple: "Do not click this link." That was all it said. The post had no description, no replies, no upvotes or downvotes. Just a single onion link beneath those words. Normally, I would have ignored something like this, assuming it was a virus or a joke. But something about it felt different. The thread had been posted just a few minutes before I found it. It felt like it was waiting for someone to see it. Without thinking, I clicked. The page loaded slowly, the screen staying completely black for a few moments before a single video player appeared in the center. There was no title, no description, no chat box, nothing except a live feed. At first, the video was too dark to make anything out. The quality was grainy, the frame slightly tilted, like someone had just set a camera down on a table or the floor. I leaned in, trying to figure out what I was looking at. After a few seconds, I realized it was a room. A basement, maybe. The walls were bare concrete, cracked and stained. There was a single wooden chair in the middle of the room, empty. I stared at the screen, waiting for something to happen. Maybe this was just some abandoned stream, a test feed that someone had forgotten to shut off. But the longer I watched, the more uneasy I felt. The room wasn't just empty. It felt wrong. Then, just as I was about to close the window, the chair moved. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it happened. A slight nudge, a faint scraping sound. The kind of movement that shouldn't happen unless something had touched it. But there was no one there. The hairs on my arms stood up. I knew what I had seen. It wasn't a trick of the camera. The chair had definitely shifted. My heartbeat picked up, but I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was overreacting. Then, out of nowhere, a chat box appeared on the screen. There was no text input for me to type, no visible usernames. Just a single message that appeared automatically. "Why are you watching?" I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I hadn't touched anything. I hadn't interacted with the page in any way. But someone knew I was there. Before I could even process what was happening, another message appeared. "You shouldn't be here." I slammed my laptop shut. My heart was racing, my skin cold with sweat. I tried to tell myself it was just a programmed response, a bot designed to scare people. But deep down, I knew better. The screen had gone black when I shut my laptop, but for a split second, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A reflection. Not mine. Something else. Something standing behind me. I unplugged everything. I pulled the battery from my laptop, shut off my router, and sat there in the dark, trying to calm my breathing. My mind was racing. Had someone hacked me? Was my webcam on? I had covered it with tape, but what if they had found a way around it? Then my phone buzzed. I jumped, my hands shaking as I reached for it. The screen was glowing in the darkness. No caller ID. I stared at it, my body frozen. I didn't answer, but a voicemail came through. My fingers trembled as I played it. At first, it was just silence. Then slowly, a sound began to emerge. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't static. It was breathing. Slow, deliberate, deep. And then, right before the message ended, there was a whisper. "I see you." I dropped the phone. My entire body was shaking. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence, some kind of sick prank, but deep down, I knew. Something had noticed me. And now, it wasn't going to leave me alone. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow in my room felt wrong, like something was shifting just outside my vision. Every little noise, the wind against the window, the creak of the floorboards, even my own breathing, felt off like something else was in the room with me, matching my movements, mirroring my breaths. I kept telling myself it was just paranoia, that I was letting my imagination get the best of me. But then, around 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look at it. I knew what I would see, but I couldn't help myself. I reached over to my nightstand, my fingers shaking as I turned the screen toward me. My stomach dropped. No caller ID. I stared at it, willing it to stop, praying that if I just ignored it, it would go away. But the screen kept glowing, the vibration rattling against the wood, each pulse making my chest feel tighter. I didn't answer, but another voicemail came through. I stared at the screen, my breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. I told myself not to listen. I played it anyway. At first, it was the same as before. Silence. Then the breathing. Long, slow inhales, exhaling like it was right next to my ear. But this time, there was something else. A sound in the background. It was faint at first. I strained to hear it, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my skull. Then I recognized it, a chair scraping against the floor. I nearly dropped my phone. It was the chair from the live stream. The voicemail ended, and for a moment, my room was silent again. My mind was screaming at me to leave, to get out, to run as far as I could. But then, before I could even move, my phone vibrated one more time. A text message. No number. No name. Just 2 words. Turn around. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I felt my body lock up, my muscles frozen in place. Every nerve in me screamed not to look, to stay completely still, to pretend I hadn't seen the message. But I felt it. A shift in the air behind me. Something was there. I clenched my jaw, every part of me refusing to turn my head, refusing to acknowledge whatever had followed me from the screen. Then, a soft knock. Not at my door. At my closet. 3 slow knocks. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then, from inside the closet, in my own voice. Why are you ignoring me? I bolted. I didn't stop to grab anything. I didn't stop to check. I just ran. I threw open my apartment door, sprinting down the hallway barefoot, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get out. When I finally stopped running, I was 2 blocks away, standing under a flickering streetlight, my hands still shaking. My phone was still clutched in my fingers, the screen cracked from where I had gripped it too hard. It buzzed one more time. Another message. You can't run forever. I stared at it, my entire body trembling. Then the final blow. A picture. It was dark, grainy, but I recognized it instantly. It was my bedroom, taken from inside my closet. I never went back to that apartment. I packed what little I could in a duffel bag the next morning and left without telling anyone. I changed my number, got rid of my laptop, switched cities. I did everything I could to erase my tracks, to disappear. For a while, I thought it worked. But some nights, at exactly 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzes. No caller ID. I never answer. But deep down I know. It's still watching. It's still waiting. And one day, I might not be able to run fast enough. I never went back to my apartment. The idea of stepping foot inside that place again made my skin crawl. I left everything behind, my furniture, my clothes, even my laptop. None of it mattered anymore. I packed what little I could into a single bag and left town without telling anyone where I was going. I changed my number, got a new phone, and deleted every account I had ever used online. For a while, it seemed like I had escaped. I rented a cheap motel room in a city where I knew no one. I kept my phone on silent, avoided mirrors, and refused to let my eyes linger on dark corners. I convinced myself that whatever had been following me had lost interest, that I had severed the connection by cutting myself off from everything. But deep down, I knew better. The first few nights were quiet. Too quiet. There was something unnatural about the stillness of my room, as if the world outside had stopped moving entirely. I barely slept, lying awake in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, listening to the hum of the air conditioning unit. Every time I closed my eyes, I expected to hear my phone vibrate. I expected to hear the knock at my door. Then on the 3rd night, it happened again. At exactly 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I sat up so fast my vision blurred, my pulse hammering in my ears. My fingers hovered over the screen, my stomach tightening with dread. The notification was the same as before. No caller ID. I turned the phone face down and backed away from it, my entire body shaking. I had sworn I wouldn't answer. I had promised myself that I would never listen to another voicemail, never open another text. But then, just as I was about to turn away, something else happened. The TV in the motel room turned on by itself. The screen flickered, static filling the small space. The volume was low, barely above a whisper, but I could hear something beneath the white noise. It was faint at first, buried beneath the layers of static, but as I stepped closer, I could make it out. A chair scraping across the floor. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. My mind screamed at me to run, to get out, but my feet wouldn't move. Then, the static on the TV began to shift. The black and white fuzz twisted, forming shapes, distorting into something that almost looked like a room. A familiar room. The walls were concrete. The lighting was dim. In the center of the screen, perfectly still, sat a wooden chair. I had seen that chair before. I had seen that room before. I had seen it on the live stream. My entire body locked up as the image on the TV flickered. The camera angle changed, shifting slightly to the left. My stomach dropped. The doorway to the room came into view, the same doorway I had seen that night, the same one where the figure had stood watching. And then, just as I had feared, it was there again. The shape in the doorway. Tall. Still. Unmoving. The static buzzed louder, the sound warping and twisting. The screen flickered, and for a brief moment, the shape took a step forward. Then, the TV shut off. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a text. The number was still hidden. There was no sender information, no way to trace where it had come from. Just a single message. I told you not to leave. I dropped the phone. My hands were slick with sweat, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. I could feel something in the room with me, even though I was alone. The air was thick, pressing in around me, suffocating. I forced myself to move, to grab my bag, to shove my feet into my shoes. I needed to get out. I grabbed the door handle and yanked it open, stepping out into the cold night air. I didn't look back. I didn't lock the door behind me. I just ran. I made it to my car and sped off down the empty highway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was still racing, my mind a jumbled mess of fear and confusion. But as I drove, I caught something in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was nothing, just the darkness stretching behind me, the empty road disappearing into the night. But then, just barely visible in the reflection, I saw it. A figure sitting in the back seat. Still. Silent. Smiling. I slammed on the brakes, my body jolting forward as the car skidded to a stop. My breath was ragged, my hands trembling. I didn't want to turn around. I knew what I would see. But the moment I blinked, it was gone. The back seat was empty. I sat there in the middle of the deserted road, gripping the wheel, my whole body shaking. And then my phone vibrated again. Another text. You can't run from me. I threw the phone into the passenger seat and stepped on the gas, my mind racing. It wasn't just the dark web anymore. It wasn't just a cursed live stream or a hacker messing with me. Something had crossed over. Something had found me. And no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, I knew the truth. I would never be alone again. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. No matter how many miles I put between myself and where it all started, no matter how many times I change my number, my name, my location, it always finds me. The calls still come. The texts still appear. The static on my TV still flickers, forming shapes I don't want to see. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear that chair scraping against the floor, a slow, deliberate sound that makes my skin crawl. I don't check mirrors anymore. I don't look at my reflection in windows, in car doors, in darkened screens. Because I know one day, I'll see something that isn't me staring back. I don't know what it wants. Maybe it was never about the dark web. Maybe the link, the video, the live stream, maybe all of that was just bait. Maybe it was always looking for someone curious enough to open the door. And I did. Now I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the day when I wake up, and my phone is already unlocked. When the text messages aren't sent to me, but from me. When the chair stops scraping against the floor, because I'm the one sitting in it. Next story.
I used to think the stories about the deep web were nothing more than urban legends. People online loved to spread tales of secret websites, of human experiments, of mysterious live streams where things happened that no one should ever see. I thought it was all just internet folklore, exaggerated horror stories meant to scare people away from the unknown corners of the web. But curiosity has a way of pulling you into places you were never supposed to go. I did not go looking for anything illegal. I did not want to buy drugs, hire a hitman, or stumble upon some underground black market. I just wanted to see for myself if any of those stories were real. I thought I was in control. I thought I could just open a few pages, browse some forums, and then shut it all down when I was done. But some things are not meant to be seen, and once you have seen them, they do not just disappear. Some things watch back, and once they have noticed you, it is already too late. It started as a normal night. I had been reading about the deep web for weeks, lurking in forums where so-called experts talked about the different layers of the internet. The surface web, the deep web, and the dark web, the last being the one that supposedly held all the terrifying secrets. It was easy enough to access. I downloaded Tor, set up a VPN, and started exploring. At first, it was disappointing. Most of the sites were old forums, dead links, and pages filled with nonsense. I found drug marketplaces, scam sites, and strange conspiracy theories, but nothing that truly felt dangerous. I was starting to think it really was just overhyped paranoia. But then I clicked on a link that led to something different. The page was completely blank, except for a single chat box in the center. There was no title, no description, no indication of what the site was for, just a blinking cursor above a single line of text. Ask me anything. I hesitated. It looked like some kind of chatbot, maybe an AI program or some kind of joke website. I decided to test it. I typed, "Who are you?" For a few seconds, nothing happened. The cursor just blinked, then a response appeared. "I am watching." A chill ran down my spine. It was not the words themselves that got to me, but the speed of the response. It was instant, as if it had been waiting for me. I told myself it was just a pre-programmed reply, something meant to mess with visitors. I decided to push further. I typed, "Washington teaching what?" The answer came immediately. "You." I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, trying to convince myself that it was all part of the script. Just a creepy gimmick. I shut the page down and closed my laptop. I told myself that was it. I was done. I would not go back. That night, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every sound in my apartment felt amplified. Every shadow looked a little deeper than it should have. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that my mind was just playing tricks on me. But something about that response kept repeating in my head. You. I should have left it alone. The next night I went back. The page was still there, still blank, still waiting. But this time, before I could type anything, a message appeared on its own. "Why did you leave?" My stomach dropped. There was no way the site could know I had left. It was just a web page. There were no trackers, no logins, nothing that should have allowed it to recognize me. And yet, it did. I typed, "How do you know that?" This time, the response came in less than a second. "I can see you." I slammed my laptop shut. My hands were shaking. I knew my webcam was covered, my microphone disabled. There was no possible way that this site, this simple chat box, should have been able to interact with me like that. But the fear in my chest told me otherwise. Something was wrong. I had made a mistake. I unplugged my router, turned off my laptop, and sat in the dark for hours, listening. Every creak of my apartment felt like something moving closer. Every rustle of fabric sounded like breathing that was not mine. I knew it was just my mind playing tricks on me. It had to be. Then my screen lit up. My laptop was closed. It should not have been able to turn on by itself. But there it was, glowing in the darkness. And for just a moment, before it finally powered down, I saw something reflected in it. But it was not me. I barely slept that night. When I did, I dreamt of shadows standing just outside my vision, of something whispering my name in a voice that sounded just like mine. At some point during the night, my phone vibrated on my nightstand. Half asleep, I reached for it, expecting some spam notification or a random late-night text. But when I looked at the screen, my blood turned to ice. No caller ID, It was almost 3 in the morning. I should not have answered, but I did. I used to think the stories about the deep web were nothing more than urban legends. People online loved to spread tales of secret websites, of human experiments, of mysterious live streams where things happened that no one should ever see. I thought it was all just internet folklore, exaggerated horror stories meant to scare people away from the unknown corners of the web. But curiosity has a way of pulling you into places you were never supposed to go. I did not go looking for anything illegal. I did not want to buy drugs, hire a hitman, or stumble upon some underground black market. I just wanted to see for myself if any of those stories were real. I thought I was in control. I thought I could just open a few pages, browse some forums, and then shut it all down when I was done. But some things are not meant to be seen. And once you have seen them, they do not just disappear. Some things watch back, and once they have noticed you, it is already too late. It started as a normal night. I had been reading about the deep web for weeks, lurking in forums where so-called experts talked about the different layers of the internet. The surface web, the deep web, and the dark web, the last being the one that supposedly held all the terrifying secrets. It was easy enough to access. I downloaded Tor, set up a VPN, and started exploring. At first, it was disappointing. Most of the sites were old forums, dead links, and pages filled with nonsense. I found drug marketplaces, scam sites, and strange conspiracy theories, but nothing that truly felt dangerous. I was starting to think it really was just overhyped paranoia. But then I clicked on a link that led to something different. The page was completely blank, except for a single chat box in the center. There was no title, no description, no indication of what the site was for, just a blinking cursor above a single line of text. Ask me anything. I hesitated. It looked like some kind of chatbot, maybe an AI program or some kind of joke website. I decided to test it. I typed, "Who are you?" For a few seconds, nothing happened. The cursor just blinked. Then a response appeared. "I am watching." A chill ran down my spine. It was not the words themselves that got to me, but the speed of the response. It was instant, as if it had been waiting for me. I told myself it was just a pre-programmed reply, something meant to mess with visitors. I decided to push further. I typed, "Washington teaching what?" The answer came immediately. "You." I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, trying to convince myself that it was all part of the script. Just a creepy gimmick. I shut the page down and closed my laptop. I told myself that was it. I was done. I would not go back. That night, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every sound in my apartment felt amplified. Every shadow looked a little deeper than it should have. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that my mind was just playing tricks on me. But something about that response kept repeating in my head. You. I should have left it alone. The next night I went back. The page was still there, still blank, still waiting. But this time, before I could type anything, a message appeared on its own. "Why did you leave?" My stomach dropped. There was no way the site could know I had left. It was just a web page. There were no trackers, no logins, nothing that should have allowed it to recognize me. And yet, it did. I typed, "How do you know that?" This time, the response came in less than a second. "I can see you." I slammed my laptop shut. My hands were shaking. I knew my webcam was covered, my microphone disabled. There was no possible way that this site, this simple chat box, should have been able to interact with me like that. But the fear in my chest told me otherwise. Something was wrong. I had made a mistake. I unplugged my router, turned off my laptop, and sat in the dark for hours, listening. Every creak of my apartment felt like something moving closer. Every rustle of fabric sounded like breathing that was not mine. I knew it was just my mind playing tricks on me. It had to be. Then my screen lit up. My laptop was closed. It should not have been able to turn on by itself, but there it was, glowing in the darkness. And for just a moment, before it finally powered down, I saw something reflected in it. But it was not me. I barely slept that night. When I did, I dreamt of shadows standing just outside my vision, of something whispering my name in a voice that sounded just like mine. At some point during the night, my phone vibrated on my nightstand. Half asleep, I reached for it, expecting some spam notification or a random late-night text. But when I looked at the screen, my blood turned to ice. No caller ID. It was almost 3 in the morning. I should not have answered, but I did. The moment I pressed the phone to my ear, I knew it was a mistake. There was no voice, no words, just breathing. Slow, deliberate, right next to the microphone, as if someone was standing inches away. Then finally, a whisper, so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. "I told you not to leave." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I could still hear the voice playing in my head over and over again, the same words, the same whisper. "I told you not to leave." I have not touched the deep web since that night. I threw out my laptop, changed my phone, moved to a different apartment, but none of it mattered. Because sometimes, when I am lying in bed late at night, my phone vibrates. No caller ID. I do not answer anymore, but it does not matter. Because as I lay there, eyes squeezed shut, heart pounding, I hear it, the breathing, and I know I was never supposed to leave. And now, it does not need the deep web to find me, because it already has. I moved to a new city, a different state, a different life. I told myself that if I got far enough away, if I made enough changes, I could leave whatever that thing was behind. Maybe it was just paranoia. Maybe my mind had twisted everything into something worse than it really was. Maybe the call, the breathing, the reflection in my screen, maybe none of it was real. But deep down, I knew the truth. It had followed me. At first, I tried to ignore it. I kept busy, avoided anything related to the deep web, refused to touch Tor or even browse certain forums where people shared their experiences. I convinced myself that if I stopped feeding into it, it would go away. But then, the phone calls started again. No caller ID. Always late at night. I never answered, but that didn't stop it from happening. Sometimes the phone would vibrate 3 times in a row, each call coming exactly 1 minute apart. And then, one night as I was staring at the screen, watching the call come in and refusing to pick up, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. It wasn't just no caller ID anymore. It was me. My own name, my own number. I stared at it, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would explode. The ringing stopped. Then, a voicemail notification popped up. I stared at it for a long time, my hand hovering over the play button, every instinct in my body screaming at me not to listen. But I did. At first, it was just silence. No breathing this time, no distortion. Then, very quietly, a voice. My voice? Let me in. I dropped my phone like it had burned me. It hit the floor and the voicemail stopped. I scrambled to grab it again, shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. The voicemail was gone, not deleted. Just gone. Like it had never been there in the first place. But I had heard it. I knew what I heard. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was in the room with me, standing just outside my vision waiting. My skin crawled with the sensation of being watched, and for the first time since I left, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't running from something outside of me anymore. It was inside. Over the next few days, things got worse. It wasn't just the calls, it was everything. My laptop would turn on by itself in the middle of the night, the screen glowing in the darkness. My phone would buzz randomly, but there would be no notifications, no record of anything happening. The lights in my apartment would flicker, but only when I was alone. And then I started seeing it. Not clearly, not at first, but I knew it was there. I would catch glimpses in reflective surfaces of shadows standing behind me when I brushed my teeth, a figure just outside the window when I turned out the lights. Always there, always just barely visible. And worst of all, it was starting to look like me. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, sleep deprivation. But then, one night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in my apartment. Slow, deliberate, too heavy to be mine. I held my breath, every muscle in my body locked in place. Then, a knock. 3 slow knocks on my bedroom door. I stared at the door, my entire body frozen with terror. Then, from the other side, in my own voice, "Let me in." I almost did. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but in that moment, something inside me wanted to open the door. My hand even twitched toward the handle before I snapped out of it, ripping myself out of bed and backing away as far as I could. The knocking stopped. The air in the room grew cold, thick like fog. I could feel something on the other side of the door, waiting. And then, just as suddenly as it came, it was gone. The next morning, I checked my door. There were scratches on it. Not from fingernails, not from anything human. Deep, jagged marks like something had been trying to claw its way in. I left my apartment that day. I didn't pack, didn't tell anyone, just grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove. But I know it doesn't matter, because it's still with me. It's inside me. I can feel it more every day. The way my reflection lingers a little too long when I look away. The way my voice sometimes doesn't sound like mine anymore. The way I catch myself thinking things I know I wouldn't normally think. And I know sooner or later I'm going to slip. I'm going to wake up one night and forget why I was afraid. I'm going to hear that voice again, just outside my door, whispering my name in my own voice. Let me in. And this time, I don't think I'll be able to stop myself. I don't know how long I've been driving. The days blur together. The highway stretches endlessly, the lines on the road flickering under my headlights like a heartbeat. I don't sleep in motels anymore. I don't stop at gas stations for longer than a few minutes. I don't speak to people if I can help it, because I know now the more I slow down, the closer it gets. The feeling of being watched never fades. It is there when I am on the road, when I pass by darkened windows, when I catch a glimpse of my own reflection in the side mirror. Sometimes I don't look fast enough, and I swear I see something sitting in my back seat. I never turn around, I just keep driving. But I think I'm starting to lose time. It started with little things. I would blink, and suddenly the gas tank was emptier than I remembered. The sun would set when I was sure it had just risen. Then, last night, something worse happened. I woke up behind the wheel. I don't remember stopping. I don't remember pulling over. But there I was, parked on the side of an empty road, the engine idling, my hands still gripping the wheel. And the worst part? The passenger door was open. Not wide open, just cracked, like someone had stepped out. Or worse, like someone had just gotten in. I slammed the door shut and sped off without thinking. My pulse was pounding, my breath short and ragged. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, convinced that if I looked at the right moment, I would see myself sitting in the back seat, watching me, smiling. I don't remember how long I drove. When I finally checked the clock, the time was 3:12 a.m. again. Always 3:12 a.m. The time of the first call. The time of the knocks on my door. The time that has followed me ever since I first visited that cursed page on the deep web. I don't know what it means, but I know that I don't want to find out. Because I'm afraid that one night, I won't wake up behind the wheel. I'll wake up somewhere else. Somewhere I can't leave. Somewhere it wants me to be. I stopped at a gas station at dawn. I needed to breathe, to try and convince myself I was still in control of something. The clerk barely looked at me as I grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of gum. I went to pay, my hands still trembling, trying to shake off the creeping feeling that had followed me through the night. Then the radio behind the counter crackled. Not music, not static, just breathing. Slow, deep, familiar. I felt my stomach drop. The cashier didn't react. He just kept scanning my items like nothing was wrong. But I knew that sound. I had heard it in my phone calls. I had heard it outside my door. And then, from the radio, my own voice whispered something that made my blood run cold. "You left the door open." I didn't say a word. I threw a 20 on the counter and walked out, forcing myself not to run, forcing myself not to look at my car windows as I passed them. I got in and locked the doors. I checked the back seat. Empty. But it didn't matter, because the message was clear. I had made a mistake. I had let something in. And now it was closer than ever. I don't know how much longer I can do this. I don't know what happens when I finally stop running. Maybe I wake up somewhere I don't recognize. Maybe I look in the mirror and don't recognize the face staring back at me. Maybe I blink and I'm the one sitting in the back seat, watching as something else drives my body. I don't think I can stop it. I think it's already too late. But if you ever get a call with no caller ID, if you ever hear a knock on your door at 3:12 a.m., if you ever see your reflection smile when you didn't, don't let it in. Because once you do, you'll never leave.
I've been a park ranger for years. I've seen all kinds of things in the wilderness, things that don't make sense, things that I wish I could forget. But there's one story that still haunts me. One night that made me question everything I thought I knew about the forest. This happened last winter, during a routine patrol near one of the more isolated trails in the park. It had been snowing for most of the day, leaving a fresh, untouched blanket of white over everything. There weren't many visitors this time of year, which meant the woods were silent, peaceful, or at least that's what I thought. I was about 5 miles from the station when I saw a set of footprints. That shouldn't have been possible. No one had checked in at the trailhead. There weren't any cars in the lot. And yet, there they were, a single line of footprints leading straight off the path and into the trees. At first, I figured it was a lost hiker. Maybe someone had wandered off trail and needed help. So I followed them. The prints were weird, though. They were deep, like whoever made them was heavy. But the spacing was wrong. Too far apart, like they had been taking huge strides. And the strangest part? There were no prints leading back. Whoever made these tracks never returned. I should have turned back right then. Should have called it in and waited for backup, but I didn't. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that it was probably some guy who had cut through the woods and taken another trail out. So I kept going. The deeper I followed the prints, the worse the forest felt. The silence was too heavy, the air too still, like the entire world was holding its breath. My radio crackled once, then went dead. No signal. That's when I started to feel it. The sensation of being watched. It wasn't normal. I've spent years out here, alone in the woods at night, and I've never felt anything like this. This wasn't just paranoia. This was something else. I kept my hand on my gun, moving slowly, scanning the trees. The footprints kept going, deeper into the woods, leading to a clearing I had never seen before. And at the center of that clearing, a cabin. It didn't make sense. There weren't supposed to be any structures out here. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it toward the door, expecting to see something, some sign of who lived here. But the cabin was wrong. It looked old, older than anything else in the forest. The wood was dark, rotting in places, covered in deep scratches, claw marks almost. And the door? It was wide open. I stepped closer, every instinct in my body screaming at me to leave. I shined my light inside. The cabin was empty, no furniture, no belongings, just a bare wooden floor, covered in more footprints, all leading inside, none leading out. And then I noticed the walls. They were covered in handprints, hundreds of them, some small, like a child's, some so big they couldn't have been human. And in the very center of the room, directly in front of the door, was a single chair, facing me. That was when I heard it. Not a growl, not a voice, just breathing, long, slow, coming from somewhere above me. I didn't look up. I couldn't. Every part of me knew that if I looked up, if I saw what was hanging there, it would be over. So I ran. I don't even remember getting back to the station. 1 second I was in that clearing, and the next I was throwing myself inside, slamming the door behind me. Locking it like that would keep whatever it was out. I didn't report what I saw. Not because I didn't want to, because when I checked the maps the next morning, when I tried to retrace my steps to that clearing, it wasn't there. The forest was untouched. No footprints, no cabin, no sign that anything had ever been there at all. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, late at night, when the radio crackles for no reason, when I feel that same heavy silence in the air, I wonder if it's still watching me, waiting. And I know, deep down, one day I'll find that clearing again. Or worse, it'll find me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my cabin, every light on, gripping my radio like a lifeline, even though I knew it wouldn't work. The silence outside felt unnatural, pressing against the windows like something was out there, waiting for me to step back into the dark. Every so often the wind would whistle through the trees, and I would freeze, straining my ears, expecting to hear something else. That slow, deliberate breathing, the shifting of something too large in the branches above me, the sound of footsteps that didn't belong to me. But the worst part? The forest had changed. I knew these trails, these woods. I had walked them hundreds of times, memorized every tree, every rock, every twist in the path. But after what happened that night, everything felt different. The trees seemed closer together, their branches curling toward each other like whispering figures, like they were sharing a secret that I wasn't supposed to hear. The shadows stretched too far, darker than they should have been, shifting in ways that weren't natural. Even the air smelled wrong, damp, earthy, with something sour underneath, like rotting wood or meat left out too long. And when I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, the dreams started. I was back in that clearing, standing in front of the cabin that wasn't supposed to exist. The footprints were still there, leading inside. But now, there were more, of them hundreds, maybe thousands, pressing into the dirt, overlapping each other, filling every inch of space. The door stood open, and in the pitch-black doorway, I could see the chair sitting exactly where I had left it. And then, slowly it began to turn. I couldn't see what was sitting in it. I didn't want to, but I knew somehow that it had been waiting for me to come back. I woke up gasping, heart-hammering, the taste of dirt in my mouth like I had been breathing in the forest while I slept. The room was still, but my hands were shaking, my skin cold with sweat. I told myself it was just a nightmare, that I was just tired, that it was my mind playing tricks on me. But when I sat up and looked at my cabin door, my stomach dropped, because on the inside, the part that only I could reach, there was a single deep scratch carved into the wood, like something had been inside the room with me, and it had left a mark. I didn't go back to the trails for a while. I gave myself extra paperwork, bad weather, helping out at the main station, anything to keep me away from that part of the forest. But deep down, I knew it didn't matter, because the forest had already followed me home. I started noticing small things at first. My compass would spin wildly whenever I got too close to the tree line. The birds stopped singing when I walked by, leaving everything in that thick, suffocating silence that I now recognized as a warning. My radio would pick up static when I was alone, sometimes crackling like a voice was trying to break through, but no one was ever on the other end. And then there was the figure. It wasn't like before. It wasn't standing out in the open, waiting for me to find it. This time, it was hiding, just at the edge of my vision, slipping between the trees, taller than it should have been. Too thin, too wrong. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing, a trick of the light, a shadow moving in the wind. But one evening, as I was finishing up patrol near the base of the mountain, I caught a glimpse of it in the reflection of my truck's window, standing directly behind me. I spun around, gun drawn, but there was nothing there, just trees. The empty, breathless quiet of the forest pressing in around me. But when I turned back to the truck, my stomach turned to ice, because now, in the reflection, I could see the trees behind me, and buried between them, half hidden in the dark, was a face, pale, smiling, and then it blinked. I didn't sleep that night either. It got worse after that. Every night, I locked my door, bolted the windows, but it didn't matter. I would hear things moving outside, slow footsteps in the dirt, the occasional soft knock on the cabin wall, like it was testing me. I stopped looking outside after the third night. The first 2 times, I thought I had seen a shadow standing just at the edge of the tree line, and I refused to give it a third chance to be closer. Then one night, the knocking stopped, and the breathing started. I woke up to the sound of it, long, slow inhales, right outside my bedroom window. My heart slammed against my ribs as I lay there, frozen, the air so thick I could barely breathe. It was so close. And then, something tapped on the glass. I forced myself not to move, not to look, because I knew deep in my bones that if I saw it, it would see me too. The tapping came again, slower this time, more deliberate, and the inner voice, not loud, not a whisper, just wrong. It sounded like someone was trying to copy human speech, but they didn't quite know how. Let me in. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The air in the room shifted. The pressure lifted. The forest was silent again. I stayed awake until sunrise, gripping the handle of my hunting knife, knowing it wouldn't do a damn thing against whatever was out there. And when I finally built up the courage to check the window, there was a handprint on the glass. Too long, too thin, with too many fingers. I put in my resignation the next morning. I didn't pack much, just threw some things into my truck and left, driving without stopping until I was far away from those woods. I didn't tell anyone what happened. What was I supposed to say? That something was out there? That it had followed me home? That it wanted me to let it in? No one would believe me. Hell, I don't even believe it half the time. But every now and then, when I wake up in a cold sweat, when I catch my own reflection in a dark window and feel that split-second hesitation before I recognize myself, I wonder if it ever really let me go, or if it's still watching, still waiting for me to finally stop running. I drove for hours that morning, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The further I got from that forest, the more I thought I would start to feel safe, but the fear never left. My mind wouldn't stop racing, replaying everything I had seen, everything I had heard. That thing in the trees, the tapping on my window, the way the forest itself had felt alive, like it was pushing in around me, closing the distance no matter how far I ran. I kept expecting to see something in the rear-view mirror, a shadow standing in the middle of the road behind me, a figure hiding in the trees as I passed. Every time I checked, the road was empty, but that didn't mean I was alone, because I could still feel it. I stopped at a gas station around noon, somewhere far enough away that I no longer recognized the landscape. A quiet little place off the highway, the kind where no one asks questions. I stepped inside, my hands still trembling as I grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of cheap snacks, my stomach twisting in knots. The cashier barely looked at me as I paid. And then, just as I turned to leave, the radio behind the counter crackled. At first, it was just static. Then, something else. Not music. Not a normal transmission. It was breathing. Long, slow, too familiar. I froze. My mouth went dry, my heart hammering in my chest. The cashier didn't seem to notice, just stood there, flipping through a magazine, completely unaware. The static grew louder. Then, through the crackling, a voice. Let me in. My hands clenched into fists. The air in the gas station suddenly felt thick, like the walls were closing in around me. I turned to the cashier, my throat tight. "You hear that?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. He looked up, frowning. "Hear what?" I stared at the radio. The static was gone. The room was silent again. Nothing had changed, except for one thing. The door to the gas station was open. I know I closed it when I came in. I know I did. But now it stood just barely ajar, swaying slightly in the breeze. I backed away, forcing myself not to look outside, not to check the reflection in the glass, because I knew what I would see. Something standing in the parking lot, waiting, watching. I grabbed my bag and ran back to my truck, jumping inside and locking the doors. My breathing was ragged, my pulse thudding against my temples. I turned the key, praying the engine wouldn't fail me. The truck roared to life. I threw it into drive and peeled out of the lot, the gas station shrinking in my rearview mirror. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I drove until my body physically couldn't take it anymore. Exhaustion weighed on me like a lead blanket, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. I pulled into a cheap roadside motorlone of those places with flickering neon signs, empty parking lots, and a front desk clerk who looked like he hadn't spoken to another person in years. I paid in cash. No names, no questions. The room smelled like mildew, but I didn't care. I just needed to rest, to lock the door and tell myself I was safe, even if it wasn't true. I pushed the dresser in front of the door, bolted the windows, double-checked the lock. Then I sat on the bed, gripping the handle of my hunting knife, and waited. Nothing happened. The motel was quiet. The silence stretched on until finally body gave out. I drifted into sleep, too tired to fight it anymore. I don't know how long I was out, but when I woke up, my phone was ringing. I sat up fast, my heart immediately slamming against my ribs. The room was dark. The only light came from the cheap lamp on the nightstand, buzzing faintly. The phone on the bedside table kept ringing. It wasn't my cell. It was the motel phone, the landline. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry, my skin cold. I didn't want to answer. Every part of me screamed not to answer, but my hand moved on its own. I picked up the receiver. For a second, nothing. Just silence. Then breathing. Slow, shallow, right next to my ear. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the phone so tightly I thought it might shatter in my hand. Then the voice came. "I found you." I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and went dead. But the moment it stopped ringing, someone knocked on the door. I grabbed my knife, my entire body trembling. The knocking was slow, deliberate. 3 knocks, then silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice let me in. It was my own voice. I don't remember what happened after that. The next thing I knew, the sun was rising. My knife was still in my hand, my knuckles white from gripping it all night. The door was still locked. The motel phone was still on the floor, silent. For a second, I almost believed I imagined it, until I looked at the door. There were scratches in the wood, 5 deep, jagged lines, and below them, in the dust-covered floor, a single footprint, too long, too thin, too many toes. I left that morning. Didn't check out, didn't take my things. Just got in my truck and kept driving. I don't stay anywhere for long now. I don't sleep near forests. I don't look at reflections in dark windows, because I know No matter where I go, it's still following me. And one day, when I'm too tired to keep running, it's going to catch up. I kept driving. I don't even remember which roads I took or where I was heading, just that I had to keep moving. Every mile that passed, every town I left behind, I told myself I was putting more distance between it and me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. You can't outrun something that isn't chasing you in the way you think it is. Because it wasn't following me. It was already with me. The first real sign that it wasn't over came a few nights later. I had driven for nearly 20 hours straight, my body running on gas station coffee and pure adrenaline. I had reached another nameless town, another motel that looked exactly like the last. I checked in with cash, grabbed my key, and didn't say a word to the front desk clerk. I went to my room, bolted the door, and pushed the dresser in front of it again. It had become a habit now, a ritual. That was the first night I saw the writing on the walls. It wasn't there when I entered. The room had been normal yellowed wallpaper, scratchy blankets, the faint smell of old cigarettes. But when I woke up around 2 a.m., heart pounding for no reason, I noticed the light in the room had changed. The walls were covered in words, not written with ink, not with paint, but scratched. Long, jagged letters carved deep into the wallpaper. Words overlapping, repeating. Some small, some so big, they stretched from floor to ceiling. I turned on the bedside lamp, my breath caught in my throat, reading them one by one. Let me in. Why did you leave? I found you. And the one that made my blood run cold. Look behind you. I didn't move, didn't breathe. For a full minute I sat there, staring at those words, forcing myself to not turn around. Because I knew if I looked, if I let myself see, it would be too late. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and ran out of that room without looking back. I started driving again, but the exhaustion was getting worse. I was barely eating, barely sleeping. The whispers were getting louder, not just in my dreams, but in the moments between wakefulness, in the corners of empty parking lots, in the static of motel visions when I let them play too long. The reflection thing, that got worse too. I stopped looking into mirrors. I stopped glancing at windows at night. Because one time, when I was washing my hands in a gas station bathroom, I forgot for just 1 second, and the version of me in the mirror didn't move at the same time I did. I stared at my reflection, my breath caught in my throat. It was subtle, so subtle that someone else might not have even noticed. But I did. I raised my hand. It raised its hand a fraction of a second too late. My stomach dropped. Then, very slowly, it smiled. I didn't. I ran. I haven't looked into a mirror since. I don't answer unknown numbers. I don't stay in motels for more than one night. I don't sleep in total darkness anymore, because now I know it wants me to see it. And the second I do, the second I really look at it, I don't think I'll be me anymore. And maybe that's the worst part, because I don't know if that's already happened. Maybe I never left that forest. Maybe I never made it out of that cabin. Maybe the person writing this, the one driving across state lines, running from shadows, hearing whispers in the dead of night, isn't me. And if it's not, then where am I? don't know how this ends. Maybe it never does. Maybe I'll keep running, keep driving, keep waking up in strange places with the overwhelming sense that something isn't right. Or maybe one day I'll finally stop. Maybe I'll wake up in a motel room, reach for my bag, and realize it's already packed, that the keys are already in my pocket, that I was planning to leave before I even opened my eyes. Because something else made that decision for me. Maybe I'll glance at the mirror on the way out, just for a second, just to confirm that I'm still me. And maybe, this time, my reflection won't even bother pretending anymore. Maybe it'll just smile, and I'll finally understand. I was never running away. I was just making space for something else to take my place. And it did. Next story.
I was a park ranger for years. I thought I had seen it all: the lost hikers, the wild animals, the weird things people leave behind in the woods. But nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered deep in that forest. We don't talk about these things. The higher-ups tell us to ignore them, to stick to the official reports. But I can't ignore it anymore, because it's still out there. If you love true horror stories, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is, especially if it's the middle of the night. Because tonight, I'm telling you the story they don't want you to hear. This is the thing in the forest. Being a park ranger sounds like a peaceful job, right? Spending your days out in nature, hiking through beautiful landscapes, making sure campers follow the rules. That's what I thought when I first started. But no one tells you about the other side of the job. The things that don't make sense. The reports that never get filed. The people who go missing and are never found. I worked at a national park for almost a decade. I won't say which one, but I will tell you this: it's big. Miles upon miles of untouched wilderness, deep forests, twisting trails, and places so remote that most people will never step foot there in their entire lives. That's where this story takes place. It started with a missing hiker. A guy in his mid-30s named Daniel Harper. He had checked into the park 2 days earlier, told the ranger at the station that he was going on a solo hike up one of the less-traveled trails. That wasn't unusual. Some people come to the park specifically to get away from civilization, to be alone. The problem? He never checked out. His car was still parked at the trailhead. No sign of him, no messages left behind. And after 48 hours with no contact, we had no choice but to send out a search team. That's how I ended up hiking up that trail. And that's how I found something that still haunts me to this day. The search started simple. 3 of us, rangers, myself, Jake, and Lisa, headed up the trail Daniel had taken. It was an overgrown path, barely marked, winding deep into the forest. The kind of place that makes you feel like the trees are watching you. The first few miles were fine. We called out Daniel's name, kept our eyes peeled for any signs of him, but the further we went, the weirder things got. First, we found his backpack. It was just sitting in the middle of the trail like he had dropped it and walked away. No damage, no signs of struggle. His water bottle was still inside, half full. His map was tucked neatly in the front pocket, but no sign of Daniel. We radioed back to the station, let them know what we found, and kept going. Then, a few miles later, we found his jacket. It was hanging from a low tree branch, like someone had carefully placed it there. Not tossed, not dragged through the dirt, just hung up as if he had taken it off and left it behind on purpose. I exchanged a glance with Jake and Lisa. This wasn't normal. At this point, we were way off the main trails, deep into the part of the park that almost no one goes to. The trees were thicker, the air felt heavy, and then we found something even worse. We reached a small clearing where the trees parted just enough to let the late afternoon sunlight filter through. That's when Lisa stopped dead in her tracks. "Guys," she said, her voice shaking, "look at this." I stepped forward, and that's when I saw them. Footprints. But not just Daniel's. There were 2 sets of tracks in the soft dirt. One was normal hiking boots, leading from the trail into the clearing. But the other was wrong. The footprints were huge, easily twice the size of a human foot. But that wasn't the worst part. They had claws. Not like bear tracks, not like mountain lion prints. These were long, narrow impressions with deep grooves where claws had dug into the dirt. I felt my stomach drop. What the hell made these? Jake muttered. Lisa shook her head. I don't know, but look where they lead. I followed the tracks with my eyes. They came out of the trees, merged with Daniel's footprints, and then only the clawed prints continued. Daniel's footprints stopped in the middle of the clearing, like he had just vanished. Jake and Lisa looked at me, waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to explain, but I had nothing, because this made no sense. But we weren't done yet, because just beyond the footprints tucked between 2 trees, we found his phone. And when we turned it on, there was one last video recorded. I don't know what I expected when we hit play. Maybe just whine noises or the sound of Daniel walking. But the moment the video started, we all froze. The camera was shaking, moving fast. Daniel was running. His breath was ragged, panicked like he'd been sprinting for miles. Then he turned the camera behind him. And that's when we saw it. A shadow, huge, inhuman, moving between the trees. Fast. Too fast. The footage was blurry, but even through the pixelation, I could see the outline of something massive. It had long limbs, too many joints, too many fingers. It didn't walk, it crawled, its body bending in ways that weren't natural. Daniel let out a choked scream, and then the camera cut to black. The video ended. That was the last anyone ever saw of him. I don't know what happened to Daniel Harper. I don't know if he ran into something ancient, something that wasn't supposed to exist. But I do know one thing. That wasn't the last time we saw those footprints. And it sure as hell wasn't the last time something went missing in those woods. The hike back to the ranger station that evening was silent. None of us wanted to talk about what we had just seen. Daniel's footprints, the clawed tracks, the video, were all trying to process it, but there were no words for something like that. You can explain away a lot of things in the wilderness animals, weather, even hallucinations, but this wasn't something we could explain, and deep down, I think we all knew it wasn't over. When we got back to the station, the sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the parking lot. We went straight inside, locked the doors behind us, and sat down around the table in the back. Jake was the first to break the silence. So what the hell do we do now? Lisa shook her head. I don't know. Do we report it? To who? I asked. You think anyone's gonna believe us? Hey, we found a missing hiker's stuff. And by the way, there's a giant clawed monster in the woods. They'll think we're insane. Jake leaned forward, rubbing his hands over his face. We have to do something, man. Daniel's still out there. Or whatever's left of him. That thought made my skin crawl. I didn't want to say it out loud, but we all knew the chances of finding him alive were slim. Whatever had made those tracks, whatever he'd seen in that video, it wasn't something you walk away from. And then, the radio crackled. At first, it was just static. But then, through the crackling, we heard it. A voice. Help me? We all froze. Jake grabbed the radio, his hand shaking. Hello? Who is this? Where are you? There was a long pause. More static. And then the voice came through again. Help me. I'm lost. It was faint, barely audible, but we recognized it immediately. It was Daniel. Lisa's eyes went wide. That can't be. There's no way. Daniel, is that you? Jake said into the radio. Where are you? Are you hurt? Another crackle. And then More words, whispered and broken. "They're watching. Don't move." The radio went dead. For a long moment, none of us said anything. We just stared at the radio like we expected it to come back to life. But it didn't. The station was dead silent, except for the sound of the wind howling outside. "We have to go back out there," Jake said finally. "Are you insane?" Lisa snapped. "It's pitch black out there. We barely made it back in the daylight, and now you want to go back at night?" "He's still alive," Jake shot back. "You heard him. He's out there and he's in trouble. Or it's a trap," I said quietly. They both turned to look at me. "What are you talking about?" Jake asked. I hesitated, trying to put my thoughts into words. That didn't sound like Daniel. Not really. And how did he get a radio? His stuff was back on the trail. He didn't have a radio when we found it." Lisa's face paled as she realized what I was saying. "You think it's not really him?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But something about this doesn't feel right." Jake opened his mouth to argue, but before he could, the lights in the station flickered. Once, twice, and then they went out completely. We were plunged into darkness. Lisa let out a small gasp, and Jake swore under his breath. I reached for my flashlight, fumbling with the switch until it clicked on, casting a narrow beam of light across the room. "Backup generator should kick on in a second," Jake said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. We waited. Nothing happened. And then we heard it. A sound outside. Soft, shuffling footsteps moving slowly around the building. Lisa grabbed my arm. "What was that?" I shook my head, trying to stay calm. Probably an animal. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The footsteps were too slow, too deliberate, like someone or something was circling the station. Jake grabbed his rifle from the rack by the door. "Stay here, I'm gonna check it out." "Are you crazy?" Lisa hissed. "You're not going out there." "We can't just sit here and wait for whatever that is to break in," Jake said. "I'll just take a quick look. If I don't see anything, I'll come right back." Before we could stop him, he unlocked the door and stepped outside. The door clicked shut behind him, and for a long time, Lisa and I just sat there, listening. At first, everything was quiet, and then we heard it. A scream. Not Jake's, not Daniel's. Something else. Something high-pitched and inhuman, echoing through the trees. Lisa clamped her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. I grabbed the radio, frantically trying to get Jake. "Jake, come in. Are you there?" Static. And then faintly, over the crackling, "They're here." The line went dead. I dropped the radio like it had burned me. "We have to get out of here," Lisa whispered. "Now." I nodded. We grabbed our flashlights and headed for the back door, moving as quietly as we could. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, but I knew that if we made too much noise, whatever was out there would hear us. We reached the door and eased it open, stepping out into the cold night air. The forest was pitch black, the only light coming from our flashlights. The wind had died down, and the air felt thick and heavy, like the whole world was holding its breath. We started toward the parking lot, moving as fast as we dared. The station was surrounded by dense trees, and every shadow looked like it was hiding something. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see, I don't even know, something crawling out of the woods, something with claws. And then, just as we reached the edge of the lot, Lisa stopped. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I listened. At first, I didn't hear anything, but then, faintly, from somewhere deep in the forest, the giggling started. The giggling was faint at first, barely audible over the rustling of leaves, but then it grew louder. It wasn't happy laughter. It wasn't the sound of children playing. It was wrong, too high-pitched, too breathy, like something was struggling to imitate the sound of a person laughing, but didn't quite understand how it was supposed to work. Lisa's grip on my arm tightened. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What the hell is that?" I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry, my brain screaming at me to run. Then, from behind us, near the station, a second giggle. Lisa and I turned slowly, our flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The ranger station stood in eerie silence, its windows dark and empty, but something moved in the shadows beside it. A shape, tall, thin, shifting. I barely had time to process it before another sound cut through the night, a scraping noise like nails dragging against wood. Then, the door of the station slammed shut. Lisa yelped, stumbling backward. My brain was stuck between fight and flight, caught in the overwhelming realization that we were not alone out here. We had to get to the truck. I grabbed Lisa's hand and pulled her towards the vehicle. The lot was small, maybe 50 feet away, but it felt like miles. Every step we took, the giggling followed. First behind us, then to our left. Then right next to my ear, I spun, shining my flashlight wildly, but there was nothing there. Nothing visible. The truck was just ahead, parked near the edge of the lot. I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped them. I could feel something behind me, something closing in, but I didn't dare look. I yanked open the driver's side door and shoved Lisa inside. I scrambled in after her, slamming the doors shut and locking them. My breathing was ragged, my hands death-gripping the steering wheel. The forest was silent again, but it wasn't gone. It was watching. Lisa wiped a tear off her cheek, whispering, "Start the truck, please." I twisted the key. Nothing. The engine didn't turn over, not even a click. I swore, trying again. Nothing. The headlights didn't even flicker. The battery was fine when we parked, but now it was dead. Lisa let out a choked sob. "Number, no. The giggling came back. This time, it was everywhere, surrounding us. Thina, tap on the glass. Right next to Lisa's head. She screamed, jerking away from the window. I turned my flashlight toward it and my stomach dropped. A handprint. Not human. A sound outside. Soft, shuffling footsteps moving slowly around the building. Lisa grabbed my arm. What was that? I shook my head, trying to stay calm. Probably an animal. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The footsteps were too slow, too deliberate, like someone or something was circling the station. Jake grabbed his rifle from the rack by the door. "Stay here, I'm gonna check it out." "Are you crazy?" Lisa hissed. "You're not going out there." "We can't just sit here and wait for whatever that is to break in," Jake said. "I'll just take a quick look. If I don't see anything, I'll come right back." Before we could stop him, he unlocked the door and stepped outside. The door clicked shut behind him, and for a long time, Lisa and I just sat there, listening. At first, everything was quiet, and then we heard it. A scream. Not Jake's, not Daniel's. Something else. Something high-pitched and inhuman, echoing through the trees. Lisa clamped her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. I grabbed the radio, frantically trying to get Jake. "Jake, come in. Are you there?" Static. And then faintly, over the crackling, "They're here." The line went dead. I dropped the radio like it had burned me. "We have to get out of here," Lisa whispered. "Now." I nodded. We grabbed our flashlights and headed for the back door, moving as quietly as we could. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, but I knew that if we made too much noise, whatever was out there would hear us. We reached the door and eased it open, stepping out into the cold night air. The forest was pitch black, the only light coming from our flashlights. The wind had died down, and the air felt thick and heavy, like the whole world was holding its breath. We started toward the parking lot, moving as fast as we dared. The station was surrounded by dense trees, and every shadow looked like it was hiding something. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see, I don't even know, something crawling out of the woods, something with claws. And then, just as we reached the edge of the lot, Lisa stopped. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I listened. At first, I didn't hear anything, but then, faintly, from somewhere deep in the forest, the giggling started. The giggling was faint at first, barely audible over the rustling of leaves, but then it grew louder. It wasn't happy laughter. It wasn't the sound of children playing. It was wrong, too high-pitched, too breathy, like something was struggling to imitate the sound of a person laughing, but didn't quite understand how it was supposed to work. Lisa's grip on my arm tightened. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What the hell is that?" I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry, my brain screaming at me to run. Then, from behind us, near the station, a second giggle. Lisa and I turned slowly, our flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The ranger station stood in eerie silence, its windows dark and empty, but something moved in the shadows beside it. A shape, tall, thin, shifting. I barely had time to process it before another sound cut through the night, a scraping noise, like nails dragging against wood. Then, the door of the station slammed shut. Lisa yelped, stumbling backward. My brain was stuck between fight and flight, caught in the overwhelming realization that we were not alone out here. We had to get to the truck. I grabbed Lisa's hand and pulled her towards the vehicle. The lot was small, maybe 50 feet away, but it felt like miles. Every step we took, the giggling followed. First behind us, then to our left. Then right next to my ear, I spun, shining my flashlight wildly, but there was nothing there. Nothing visible. The truck was just ahead, parked near the edge of the lot. I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped them. I could feel something behind me, something closing in, but I didn't dare look. I yanked open the driver's side door and shoved Lisa inside. I scrambled in after her, slamming the doors shut and locking them. My breathing was ragged, my hands death-gripping the steering wheel. The forest was silent again, but it wasn't gone. It was watching. Lisa wiped a tear off her cheek, whispering, "Start the truck, please." I twisted the key. Nothing. The engine didn't turn over, not even a click. I swore, trying again. Nothing. The headlights didn't even flicker. The battery was fine when we parked, but now it was dead. Lisa let out a choked sob. No. The giggling came back. This time, it was everywhere, surrounding us. Thina tapped on the glass, right next to Lisa's head. She screamed, jerking away from the window. I turned my flashlight toward it and my stomach dropped. A handprint. Not human. The fingers were too long, the shape too narrow, like something had stretched itself into the shape of a person but hadn't gotten it quite right. Lisa was crying now, full on shaking. I didn't blame her. We were trapped. Then footsteps on the roof. Soft, slow, deliberate. I could hear it moving, shifting its weight, crawling over the truck like it was studying us. I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. We have to make a run for it. Lisa's head snapped toward me. "Are you insane? It's right there." "We don't have a choice," I said. "If we stay here, we're dead. If we run, maybe we have a chance." Lisa was hyperventilating, but she nodded. We counted to 3. Then we ran. I threw the door open and bolted. Lisa was right behind me. We sprinted toward the tree line, toward the dirt road that led away from the station. We weren't thinking. We weren't planning. We were just running. The giggling turned into screams. Horrible, distorted screams, like a chorus of voices layered on top of each other. Something was chasing us. I didn't look back. I knew if I did, I'd see it. And if I saw it, I'd freeze. And if I froze, it would take me. The trees blurred past. I could hear Lisa's breath, fast and panicked, just a step behind me. The road was ahead. If we could just get to the road, Lisa screamed. I turned, skidding to a stop. She was gone. Just gone. The forest around me was silent again. I spun, shining my flashlight in every direction. Lisa? Lisa? Nothing. And then, something breathed right behind me. I turned, and I saw it. It wasn't a shadow anymore. It wasn't just a shape. It was tall, its limbs too long, too thin. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, its mouth too wide. And its eyes, empty, black, reflecting my flashlight like an animal's. The giggling came again, but this time, it was coming from inside my own head. Thin darkness. I woke up alone. The sun was rising, casting golden light through the trees. I was lying on the side of the dirt road, my flashlight still clutched in my shaking hands. Lisa was gone. The truck was gone. Even the ranger station was wrong. It looked abandoned, like it had been empty for years. Windows shattered, roof caved in. Like it had been left to rot long ago. Like it had never been there at all. I don't remember how I got out. I don't remember walking. But somehow, I made it back to civilization. When I tried to report what happened, no one believed me. The park records had no record of Lisa, no record of Jake, no record of Daniel Harper. As if none of them had ever existed. I quit that day, left the park, never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the giggling. And I know, deep down, it's still watching me. I didn't sleep for a long time after that. Not really. I would lie in bed, eyes open, heart pounding, waiting. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against my window, every small, innocent sound felt wrong. It felt like something was still there, just beyond my vision, just beyond my understanding. The nightmares were the worst part. They weren't like normal dreams. They didn't fade when I woke up. They stayed with me, burned into my mind like they had really happened. Every night, I saw the same thing, the forest stretching endlessly in every direction, the trees twisting and shifting like they were alive. I was running, always running, and behind, might. The thing, the watcher. Its long limbs bending in unnatural ways, its mouth stretched into that impossible smile. And worst of all, the laughter. That horrible, distorted giggling, echoing all around me, inside me. Some nights, I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, convinced that if I opened my eyes, I would see it standing in the corner of my room. Other nights, I swore I heard it outside my window. A slow tap, a whisper, a giggle. But it never came inside. Not yet. I moved to a new town, far from the park. Got a job in a quiet place, nothing to do with the wilderness. I told myself that if I stayed away from the trees, from the deep, lonely places, I would be safe. But fear doesn't work that way. It follows you. It burrows deep, infecting everything. One night, months later, I got a call. It was from a number I didn't recognize. No name. Just a long string of digits, unfamiliar and wrong. Like it didn't belong to any real area code. I almost didn't answer, but something in me needed to. I pressed the phone to my ear. At first, nothing. Just silence. And then breathing. Slow, ragged, wet. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat was dry, my body frozen in place. And then, finally, a voice. Not human. Not right. It was layered, like multiple voices speaking at once, overlapping, out of sync, and it said, "Why did you leave?" I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, but the sound didn't stop. The giggling was coming from inside my house now. I grabbed the closest weapon I could, a kitchen knife, me breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The room was too quiet, the air too thick. I turned in slow circles, my eyes scanning the corners, the shadows, expecting to see it standing there, but there was nothing. And then the lights flickered. Once, twice, and thin darkness. Everything in me screamed to run, to get out, but my body wouldn't move. I stood there in the pitch black, gripping the knife so tightly my fingers ached. The air in the room shifted, the temperature dropping fast. My breath came out in small, visible puffs. And then, just behind me, a whisper. "It's not done with you." I turned, slashing blindly with the knife, but my hands met nothing. The lights flickered back on. I was alone. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I should have left the house that night. I should have burned it to the ground. But fear does something to you. It makes you second guess. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you wonder if you're just losing your mind. So I stayed. For a while, things were quiet. The nightmares faded. The whispers stopped. I told myself that whatever had followed me, whatever had come out of those woods, had given up. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound that made my blood run cold. A knock. 3 slow knocks. At my bedroom door. Not the front door. Not the window. My bedroom door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, after a long silence, the handle started turning. It was inside my house. I grabbed my phone, scrambling to turn on the flashlight. The second the room filled with light, the knocking stopped. The handle went still. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I packed a bag and left. I don't live in one place anymore. I move around. I don't stay anywhere for too long. I don't sleep near forests. I don't go hiking. I don't go outside at night. And no matter where I am, I always keep the lights on. Because I know, deep down, it's still watching. And someday, it's going to come back. I thought leaving would help. That if I kept moving, if I never settled in one place too long, it wouldn't be able to find me. That whatever had come out of those woods, whatever had taken Lisa, whatever had whispered in the dark, whatever had knocked on my door wouldn't be able to keep up. But fear is patient, and so is it. At first, things were quiet. I slept better. The nightmares weren't as frequent. I stopped hearing the giggling, stopped feeling like I was being watched. I told myself it was over. That maybe, just maybe, I had escaped. Then, one night, I was staying in a cheap roadside motel somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I don't even remember what state I was in. I had stopped keeping track. The important thing was that it was far from the park, far from those woods. I had just started to drift off when I heard it. A single, slow knock. Not at the door, at the closet. I shot up in bed, my heart slamming against my ribs. My body knew before my mind caught up. It was here. The room was silent. The air was thick, heavy, wrong. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. I turned on the flashlight, pointing it at the closet door. It was open just an inch. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't even checked it when I came in. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then, from inside the closet, I heard it. That same giggle. Soft, too high-pitched, wrong. And then the door creaked open, just a little more. I grabbed my bag and bolted. I didn't even stop to check out. I just got in my car and drove, hands white-knuckled around the steering wheel, eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting to see something sitting in my back seat. But I didn't. The road stretched on, dark and empty. The headlights cut through the night, but the shadows beyond them felt alive. I don't remember how long I drove. Hours, maybe. I didn't stop until the sun came up, until exhaustion forced me to pull into another town, another nameless motel. This time, I checked the closet, and I locked it. For a while. That was my life. Driving. Sleeping in different places, never staying long enough for it to find me again, but deep down, I knew it was a lie. Because it wasn't following me, it was already inside me. The nightmares came back, stronger, worse. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my body drenched in sweat, the echo of that giggling still ringing in my ears. And sometimes, just before I woke up, I'd hear it whisper my name. Then, something even worse happened. I stopped waking up alone. One night, I jolted awake, gasping, my heart racing. I could still hear my own scream ringing in the empty motel room. My breath came in ragged gasps, my body frozen in place. And then, I felt it. A hand